Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show, it's about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the season finale of Coroner, a great season finale. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, we're continuing after the big revelations from last episode. We had Jenny showing up at Kelly's place, and immediately I'm like, is this even Kelly's place? Especially when she goes in there and sees the fruit. It's like, oh, the place hasn't been taken care of. Because at first I was like, is she just pretending like she stays there? I almost half expected the place to be completely empty until Jenny's kind of caught in one of her trances and she's cutting up food because, like, obviously she was with Kelly last time, and I guess it's like some like pretty soon after everything, and it's like because Kelly at one point says like, oh, I know I don't really know you that well, but she finds out like, oh, your husband David died, he did a lot of the cooking and stuff like that, and they're kind of bonding a little bit, and she's like, yeah, I kind of feel like I've known you my entire life or something like that. And it makes the whole thing in retrospect seem crazy. What looks crazy is when the owner of the house, like comes back with his family. He's like, whoa, what the hell are you doing here, lady? Strange lady cutting stuff up him. And it's like, okay, do you notice? It's like, oh yeah, she said her name was Holly, but basically she was looking after his place, but pretending she lived there. I was like, this is interesting and more complicated. And it's like, what's this all about? And then at one point, she's, Jenny watches a video, and then we find out what that video is. It's her doing like a crowdfunding because she's like, oh, my baby died. She's putting on performance. I was like, this lady is sick. She didn't come back to that place because she knew that Jenny would be looking for her there. But it's like, holy crap, you're kind of technically on the run. Because at first I was like, oh, any money she's trying to raise is her trying to disappear. So now they have to look into like, what this is all about. Because luckily Lucy was able to repair some of the picture that was cropped, and it turns out there were two kids because there's the one that isn't her actual son, and then there's the other one that is her son. So it begs the question like, okay, so what's really going on here? You're trying to figure the whole situation out. And so obviously Jenny and Donovan go to check out, where she had posted the video where Robbie's body, or quote unquote Robbie's body, was found. But then like looking at something nearby, Donovan correlates it to Nora. So he goes to her place. It's like that ribbon that was tied around. It's like that baby that wasn't her baby. It was your baby. And she's like, no, like my husband's calling you. This isn't a good time. He's like, no, I'm not here as Donovan, the dude in the suit. I'm here as Detective McAvoy. And it's like, all right, if you don't want to, I can talk to your husband about it. And it's like, no. So we finally get the breakdown of that situation. We finally learn the truth, because for her, it's like she was scared to tell the truth because it's like what this would mean in the grand scheme of things for her and, her husband's situation, because it turns out she says she murdered her son because her son was like a little temperamental, but like eventually laid down and went to sleep. But then a couple hours later, when she tried to call out to her son, no response. And it's like, did he have a pulse? But she didn't know because she was so in panic mode that she did, what's the CPR? I was blanking on it because I kept wanting to say Heimlich maneuver, but I'm like, no, that's not the right thing. But she tried to do CPR and she felt her son's bones crash, so she blamed herself. But then it's like, okay, it turns out this whole thing was an insurance scam because obviously. Because it like Donovan's like, why didn't you go to police? She's like, if I told to police, would you have actually believed me? And then what about my husband? Like, it was a complicated sad turn of events. So Kelly offered to help her. It's like, we'll pretend it's Robbie, because this way she was trying to get away from a terrible situation. Because we never actually got confirmation on whether or not Ed was abusive, if that's what she was trying to get away from or not. Maybe he actually was, and maybe that's why Nora was kind of on board with this. It's like, hey, he's a terrible person. Like, obviously she deals with women who are in abusive situations, so maybe that's what kind of made this whole thing kind of work out. But it's like, that way they'd get the insurance money and, without Nora getting in trouble. But obviously for Jenny it upsets her because it's like, so this whole thing was like an insurance scam, because it's not just Ed that died in that fire. So many other people died for like this situation. So at the same time, there's the whole Liam thing. Gordon comes to find Liam smashing holes in the wall, and because obviously for him it's the drip. It's like Gordon was like, there is no drip. That you just it's like there is no drip. But obviously he's like, I'm gonna go, and it's like Ross follows him because it's like, yeah, he's probably going to do something dangerous of what Gordon was saying. And he was out there shooting. I was like, oh shit. I was like, this is going to end bad. Please tell me like it's probably going to be, I'd rather this not be the case, but I was thinking like, oh, he's going to shoot at Ross. Luckily, he's going to miss, but because it's going to be so close, it's going to snap him out of it. But luckily, Ross came up, but I was worried like Ross is going to, because at one point he sees someone walking. I thought that was going to be Ross, and I was like, hopefully, luckily the bullet will miss, but it's still like, that's a little too close for comfort. But Ross was able to fight him and snap him out of it. He's like, if you don't stop, I'm going to tell Mom. And that kind of brings him back to reality to be like, what the hell am I doing, you know? So Jenny's got to deal with that. At the same time with all this other stuff going down, Malik was keeping an eye out on Kelly, but sadly she ended up slipping away. I guess she found out that the cops were, following her, in particular Malik was. So it's like, all right, so how do we approach this situation now? Because obviously there is no evidence, because Donovan kept saying, because part of me was thinking like, well, really, Donovan, the reason why you want to go after Kelly is because of the Noor connection, but I think it's also because he knew what it meant if he had to bring Noor in, because he cares about her, but also knowing what she does. So I figured for him, it's probably like he doesn't want to blow up her situation of her helping out women. So I think that's probably also it. But also there was nothing directly correlating between, Kelly and all the shady and straight up malicious and evil stuff that she's been doing. So, but at the same time, Gordon and Ross give Jenny her time with Liam, and it's sad because for Liam, it's like, he acknowledged, he's like, I have PTSD, and for him, it's, him and Jenny have to break up because it's like, he's like, I don't know how to get help and stay here, so for him, and I think Jenny doesn't really say much, and I think it's a situation where, like, she understands because she has her own PTSD, but it's just a situation of, like, this is someone she cares about, that, this is them breaking up. It's like, who knows, like, what the future holds for them, maybe, after Lee. I mean, because I'm sure it's going to be, like, a long struggle. I don't think it will ever be something that's 100% fixed. I think probably just like Jenny's situation, like, it's always going to be there, but it's about, like, how you handle it going forward, like, preparing yourself with the proper tools necessary to handle, keeping that in your heart while also I think the same thing for Liam. Like, maybe, it's to give him the tools necessary to kind of deal with everything while also kind of, taking life one step at a time, not letting the past kind of, I don't know. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a trained professional, so I don't know what would be, the ins and outs of treatment for his PTSD and, like, what the process would be like for him. But it's, they kind of have to say their goodbyes, And sadly at the wrong time, because lo and behold, Kelly shows up because she drugged Jenny. In fact, like, she had switched out Jenny's. She's like, oh yeah, I knew you, like, if I left your pills here, you'd immediately jump on it. And it, it switched him out. And now Kelly's almost doing, like, her villain monologue, becoming, like, basically being like, you are so, like, I kept, like I said, Jenny, like, the moment Jenny kind of brought Kelly back into her life, I was like, this lady, something's off with this lady. I mean, it just screamed it, and I just wasn't for sure about it, but it was just like, ever since, like, I kept saying, like, it seemed like Kelly was trying to tell Jenny's life, and she kind of was. Well, in a more literal sense and in a figurative, well, also still being literal sense, because it's like, oh, I'm going to kill you, but also you are so focused on work and everything, which is sad because Jenny's got other things too, but she's like, you're so focused on your work and death, you don't recognize what's good, and you have your dad, you have Ross, and it's like, I love them, and it's like, I love you too, Jenny, but it's like, you're ungrateful, you don't realize what you have, it's so special, because she talks about the fact that she's like, oh, my parents got murdered in front of me, and I was, like, hidden under the bed. So I was like, and I think this could be, you could interpret this as, like, a representation of, like, what trauma does to different people, how it affected Liam, how it affected Jenny, how it affected Kelly. Is, we actually don't get any background in, like, what else is up with Kelly's situation. That's why I'm also wondering, like, when this is all said and done, will we ever get any more of Kelly? I mean, you never know, but it's like, the fact of the matter is, like, I guess, like, she just kind of got broken as a human being. Like, I don't know. Like I said, it just seems like something traumatic in your life forged these three different people into three different ways, and so it's like, I mean, maybe that's also the parallels they're trying to make, like how Jenny's trauma manifests itself in comparison to how Kelly's did. I mean, it's kind of like some very, like, Dexter level stuff, because Dexter ended up the way he did because of seeing his mom brutally, let's not forget, super brutally murdered in front of him, and obviously that would mess you up as a kid. So I guess it's the same thing in this case, but she literally tries to kill Jenny the same way she did And even telling her, it's like, don't worry, you're gonna be better off, and everyone's gonna be better. Because at first I was almost like, what do you think, you're gonna come back into like Ross and Gordon's life? And I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry about Jenny, because you're about to take the money and run because your situation got blown up. So it's not. So that's why I'm like. But I think she's saying, like, without you around, Ross and your dad, they'll probably trying to indicate like, oh, they'll be sad for a little bit, but eventually they'll be better off without you. And sadly, the pills were kicking in and Jenny was fading. I was like, is someone going to show up to save her? I was like, is Liam going to turn back around and save her in time? But it's like, it ended up being her hearing Katie's voice, which I thought that was kind of beautiful, like hearing her sister call her, like, Jenny, you need to get out of that. And luckily, Jenny got out. She ends up taking a sample of her own blood and trying to, eventually they tested against what little blood they could get from Ed's body to examine it and see whether or not there was a correlation to kind of prove that he was drugged beforehand. And so that was interesting. And luckily they were able to find, the evidence. And so Nora helped set up the whole Kelly situation, because Kelly was like, okay, you got the money so we can get out here? Okay. And then, like, as the cops show up, she started weeping. She's like, I did. And I'm like, oh, God, look at you playing it up. She's like, And then when you look at it, she stops for a second when she sees that Jenny's still alive. And she turns back and starts, I'm like, dude, I'm curious, will there ever be any more with her? Like, whether it be a thing of, like, you see her, like, post being in jail and stuff like that, and there end up being any more storylines. Probably not. It's just kind of like you're done with. But it's like, I want to understand more about why she did what she did, because she doesn't seem remorseful, because it's like, not only did you kill Ed, you killed so many other people who died in that building. I mean, home dude that died went in there trying to who had a crush on Kelly. I forgot home dude's name. He died, but like, I think they ended up saying it in the first episode, like his situation ended up being a by-proxy of him going in there trying to help people. So it's just, sadly, it was like the building situation. Like, she was only planning on killing Ed, but because of the building, it was a complicated circumstances, but it's still a thing of, you were responsible for a lot of people's deaths and you seemed like you didn't give a shit. Like, she definitely looked psychotic. And especially that whole, like, on many occasions throughout the episode, like I said, crying and just putting on a scene. Once again, crying, stopping when she sees Jenny, and then starting up again. It's like, you are seriously messed up, lady. So that was interesting to kind of see that ultimately resolve like that. When it was all said and done, too, Donovan, obviously for Nora, it's like, thank you for everything, helping out with her husband's situation, and saying, like, if we had, if this was a different time, a different place, maybe this could have been, but obviously for Donovan, it's like, but we are in this time and we are in this world, so, and obviously, now it also adds more context to the episode we met Nora, where she had, like, hung up with her husband and she was crying. Now it makes more sense about what that was about. It's because she hadn't informed her husband at the time about what happened to their son, so it adds more context there. Because I was like, oh, we never found out what that was, because like the signal messed up, so I guess it's just she could never bring herself to admit the truth, because for one, she blamed herself, because luckily Jenny proved, like, hey, at least to Nora, to prove to her, like, you didn't kill your son had a virus, and it's just the virus killed your son, not you. So, like, sadly, he was already dead by the time she performed CPR, because she thought, like, maybe her performing CPR what killed him, but that ended up not being the case. So it doesn't bring him back, but it alleviates some of that guilt she had, that it was something outside of her hands, because it's like a super rare virus. But obviously, like, her and her husband being there near that ribbon or that thing she had tied, kind of representing, like, her son. So obviously Jenny sending Gordon, Mateo, and Ross off on, like, it's like, oh yeah, this is your dream car, yeah, but you don't get to drive it, Gordon. He was like, yeah, maybe, let me drive it for a little. He's like, no, Dad, you don't get to drive it, just, get to have fun. So I thought that was just kind of a nice send-off. Like, obviously, because even Ross being like, are you going to be okay? She's like, I'm going to be fine. Obviously, it's not going to be the easiest thing, considering, like, hey, the house that you almost died in, which is, I don't know, irony would be the right word, because remember the previous tenant literally died in the house, and that's how Jenny ended up getting this place. I don't know. I don't think that's irony, but I just thought it was just kind of interesting when you think about that. But obviously at the end, Donovan goes to his sister's wedding, and there's a seat for the plus one. I was like, is it Jenny? And a little bit, yeah, it's like Jenny. She's like, sorry, I'm late. It's like, no, I'm glad you showed up. I'm glad you could come, because my sister would never forgive me if I didn't have the seat filled. And them at the party and everything, and it's just kind of like, Donovan and her being there side by side, I thought was pretty dope. And also, like, it's like, oh yeah, like, and she's like, oh yeah, there's that like alien thing over here. He's like, yeah, we are not alone. And obviously he was talking about in an alien sense, but I also thought it was kind of beautiful because in this sense it also represented them, I think, in a sense of like, it's despite everything, like, oh, we kind of have each other. Like, obviously there's kind of an up and down situation for both of them. Obviously very complicated for Jenny. I skipped over it, but her therapy session was kind of very like poetic and beautiful in a sense, because obviously she ain't terrible therapist, everything, but she was like, she's like, I was in a bad situation and I saw my sister, and it's like, obviously there's a word for it, but then she was joking about something, because she was like third bunny something, and he was like, what? She's like, that was just kind of an inside joke. For her, it's a situation where she looked like, she's like, for so long I carried so much anger about what happened to Katie, but she's like, honestly, like, I've kind of let it go, because it's like, I recognize I didn't do what I did to Katie. It was an accident. I was a kid, I didn't want to hurt her. And it's like, if you could go back and tell your younger self anything, it was basically that, once again, tell her younger self it's okay. And I think that's the beautiful steps, because she's even saying, like, she thinks that she hasn't sleptwalked since all of this, but she thinks she's not going to anymore. It's like her finally, I guess almost like forgiving herself because it wasn't her fault, and kind of letting go of that anger. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see, what steps this makes for Jenny, going forward. Coroner was renewed for a third season. Obviously, this is like after the second season had already originally aired. Obviously, this is its airing here in the U.S. But on CBC, which is the Canadian channel the show airs on in Canada, it was already renewed for a third season. So I'm only assuming like I'm curious how they do it. I'm assuming maybe when season 3 originally airs, whenever it does eventually air in Canada, that I'm assuming that it's going to simulcast here on the CW as well, maybe they'll kind of. I think the only reason why they did the seasons being off thing is because I guess just the licensing deals finally went through, so that's why obviously it's airing afterwards. But but I'm curious to see what season 3 entails. Like, obviously, will we see more of Liam and his path crossing with Jenny? Like I brought up before, I think it's so interesting that and I like this because like some shows will end on a major cliffhanger in the sense of like stuff carries over, and each season is very like its own thing. So like season 1 had like storylines that they just kind of like brought to an end, and the same thing in this season. So I'm curious to see where these kind of new stories pick up. In particular, like I said, for Jenny, like now that she's kind of confronted a lot of her trauma, the whole Katie thing, what that means going forward for her. Like I said, things with her and her dad and Ross. Also, like I said, if Liam comes back, Donovan, and in general, what new cases and what new storylines await them in season 3. I'm very excited to find out. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.